I've been meaning to make this exact video for a while now, simply because the question pops up so often. How can we become better at learning anything? Or how can learning become a habit for us? And the thing is that there are a couple of things that we need to understand before we can develop our strategies and before we actually know what we need to do. And that's what I'll start with now. And for that, of course, I need a way to visualize. And the first thing we need to understand and discuss about learning is one common definition. Simply because you probably think of learning in a different way as I am right now, which is why we need a kind of working definition. And I like to use the one that is used most commonly in psychology. And in psychology, it's always mentioned of two different states. There is a state A and a state B. Now, what would be an easy example? Okay, the easiest example I can think of right now is with this jar. In a state A, I am unable to open this, right? I maybe don't even know what this is. I can look at it, I can turn it around, but I am unable to open this. But at a later point in time, if I'm then able to open this, this means that by the definition, I will have learned in between. And that's the pure definition of learning as it's used in psychology. So that always has to do with an observable behavioral change, meaning that it's not learning if I've only read a book. It's not learning if I can repeat something. It's not even learning if I can recite a whole book to you. It's only learning if there is an observable behavioral change. And for me, that's extremely important. When I say become better at learning anything, that's what I mean. I mean that you can learn the things that you actually want to do. And that's the first thing that I recommend you to think about. What is your B? Whenever you think about whatever it is that you want to learn, think about what is the goal. What is the actual performance that you want to be able to make? And this makes a huge difference for a simple reason. I need to visualize this in a different way. One of the most common mistakes that I observe when people talk about learning and when they talk about ways to become better at it is that they always talk about the arrow. So they talk about what they want to read, what they want to look at, what they want to watch, who they want to talk to. And this always seems to come first. But that's a real problem because our brain doesn't work that way. Our brain works entirely different. What you need to do is you think of this B first. So you really think of what do I wanna make, do, or create, or any active verb that you can think of. And then this arrow, this will come naturally. As a simple example, if, for example, I want to get better at filmmaking, I will find a ton of courses, I will find a ton of information, I will find so many things that might seem helpful. But unless I have a concrete project that I'm working on, a very definitive state that I want to be able to reach, I will not be learning very fast or efficient, because I will spend a lot of time going down routes that are probably not as helpful as I would hope them to be. So remember, define what the B is and don't think of the arrow too much. Just to back this up with a super easy example. Imagine I had coffee in here right now, and for whatever reason, it were my goal to move this cup around my head. Now, there are two different ways to verbalize what I'm doing. The easiest one is I'm trying to move the cup around my head without spilling any coffee. Without spilling any coffee is my B. And that's very simple to understand. And everything that I'm doing with my arm, with the rest of my body, comes naturally. If I instead were trying to describe what I am doing, it's almost impossible to describe that. So what is my hand doing? What is my arm doing? Where is my elbow going? And all that. And that's sometimes what we're doing when we think about learning, which makes it a lot more complex and not very efficient and goes in, I would say, a wrong direction. The second thing I would really like you to understand is actually a quote from Ken Robinson. And he writes that in one of his books. It's in Finding Your Element. And it perfectly describes another perspective on learning that helps a lot in thinking about what you need to do. And the quote goes like this: learning is a two-world journey. It's really hard to make a round shape with this. I think you'll get the point. So learning is a two-world journey. What does that mean? We all live in the same outside world, which is this yellow circle. So the world of other people, the world of politics, the world of globalism, whatever there is. This outside world that remains probably untouched by our existence. And someday we will disappear, and the outer world, this outside world, probably doesn't even notice. We're just gone. Then there is a different world, which is the inner world. And this world is only known by ourselves, and it only comes into existence by our existence. So this is the world of our emotions, feelings, sensations, experiences. And Ken Robinson famously said that learning is a two-world journey, simply for the reason that we only have this inner world available to experience the outside world. And this means that each and every one of us always has a very, very unique and individual perspective on the outside world. Now, what does this have to do with learning? This means that whenever we face a challenge, whenever there's something that we want to do, this always has more to do with ourselves than with the outside world. Of course, there are challenges in this outside world that are commonly known and can be described, but in general, whenever I am facing a challenge, it has as much to do with myself, my inner world, than it has to do with the outside world. And when it comes to learning anything easier and faster, this is what we ourselves need to learn. We need to learn how much of that challenge that I'm facing right now actually has to do with the outside world and how much, in fact, has to do with my inner world. And this brings me to the last point that I would like to make in this video. How can you develop a strategy from that? So knowing that you need to have a very clear and precise performance outcome and B state, knowing that learning has as much to do with yourself as much as with the outside world, how can you go about this? And the method that I use, that I developed, is called Learning Compass. It's called Learning Compass because it gives orientation, for one. And I believe that learning is a circular process. It's not a linear process. So what does the Learning Compass look like? Like a normal compass, it's got 4 directions. And those 4, they stand for the different states that you always go through when you are learning anything. And the most important thing to understand about this learning compass is that I will write down the 4 phases on there in a second, but it's most important to understand that you can enter this compass from any direction, and you will also be able to exit it into any direction when learning anything. So you don't need to start with this one, or don't need to start with this one, and you don't even need to finish the whole thing, but you will notice that you will keep going round in circles, whatever it is that you're learning. The first phase that I will mention, but remember, it's not a linear order. The first phase is the experiment phase. It, of course, is a great phase to start any learning process, but it won't always be the first phase that you will go through when learning anything. But if I'm doing something new, for example, I'm entering the filmmaking realm, then I will, of course, start experimenting with cameras, start experimenting with emotions, and all those things. But it's only the experimentation that gives myself an understanding of also where am I standing in this outside world. So what am I already able to do? What did I maybe already understand? Where are my biggest questions? And so you notice that the next phase after the experimentation phase has something to do with looking outwards, because after I've experimented, I will probably have a lot of questions. So the next phase is the information phase. After I've experimented, I will have questions and I need answers for those. That's when I will need to look outwards. I would need to look for information and people to help me. Then I will, of course, have to put the information that I found into my very own context. And that's the implementation phase. And you notice as we're going around this, we are always switching between inside and outside world, because learning is a two-world journey. In the implementation phase, I will try to take the information that I found outside and implement it in my very own context. So for example, I've learned that color grading in filmmaking has the effect X. So I will try, if I do color grading myself in that way, if it can have the same effect on the work that I do. And after some time, I will have implemented a couple of different things, of course. And that's when I will be in the next phase. And the next one is reflecting. Because then I need to reflect on what I just did. Did it work? Did it have the effect that I read about before? Did it have a completely different effect for me? What does this do for my understanding of the problem? How does this maybe change the way that I will experiment next time? And you see that everything that I do in each of those phases already leads me naturally towards the next phase. And that's where I think the Learning Compass is super helpful. I have learned so many things using this way of thinking. Using it also with other people has led me to believe that this actually works. And it's not just those 4 phases, but each of those phases individually also has 3 different stages. Do, reflect, and plan. So, for example, in the experimentation phase, I will start doing something. Experiment with video, experiment with, I don't know, a language that I'm learning, with a programming language that I'm learning. And then inside the experimentation phase, I will reflect. Did it work? What didn't? maybe I need to change something next time. And then I plan, and the planning will be for the next phase. So if I'm currently in the experimentation phase, then I will plan for the information phase. I will plan, what do I need to know? Who do I need to speak to? And what will I have to do in the information phase in order to move on? I really believe that if you take care of these three things, number one being, what is my state B? Number two being the two-world journey. So it can have as much to do with myself as it has with the outside world. And number three, the learning compass. Then I believe that you'll be able to learn anything a lot easier, faster, and probably even in a more meaningful way to you. I think the past 2 years have shown that learning is one of the most essential skills for all of us. It doesn't matter what you want to be able to do. It doesn't matter what your goals are. And we cannot rely on a formal education system because the education system moves in a different speed as opposed to the outside world. So mastering your own learning skills is what I believe is to be the most important skill for all of us. So if you thought, that's really interesting. So what can I do right now? Find a project. Find a project that you want to work on. Create something. Teach something. Build something. Connect to somebody and try to do something together. Whatever it is, find a project and think about where you want to move the whole project. Where do you want to go? And then apply the things that I just explained to you, one by one. What is my B? Where am I in this outside world currently? Where do I want to be at a certain point? And then go through the learning compass, cycle by cycle by cycle. And one day, you'll look back and you'll realize, wow, this has actually worked. Because it does. And this only works if we view learning as a natural, organic process. Because it is. We cannot plan it. We cannot really understand what it is. So if you think about this, we cannot describe what's going on here. We can only describe what it is that we want to do. And the same applies for learning. So I wish you all the best. And I do believe that if you apply those things, you'll be able to learn anything easier and faster.